The lawyer's voice echoed through the mahogany-paneled office as he read my father's final words. To my beloved daughter Lyra Kane, I leave the Kane family estate in its entirety, including all buildings, grounds, and waterfront access. I felt relief wash over me. The historic waterfront property had been in our family for 4 generations. Dad always said it would be mine someday. Across the room, my stepmother Vivienne sat perfectly still in her designer suit, her manicured fingers gripped tightly around her Hermes purse. When the lawyer finished, she turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How wonderful for you, darling," she said, her voice honey-sweet. "Though I do hope you understand how much responsibility comes with such a significant asset." Something in her tone made my stomach twist. Vivienne had only been married to my father for 2 years before his sudden heart attack. I barely knew her, but I knew enough to recognize when someone was planning something. "I'm sure I can handle it," I replied carefully. Her smile widened, and for a moment, I saw something sharp and calculating flash behind her perfect facade. I should have trusted that instinct. 3 weeks later, I drove up to the estate for the first time since the funeral. The sprawling Victorian mansion sat majestically on 20 acres of pristine waterfront, its wraparound porches and tower windows overlooking the bay. But as I pulled into the circular driveway, I noticed strange cars parked outside. A black Mercedes, a white BMW, and a van with Premier Realty painted on the side. My heart sank as I walked toward the house. Through the tall windows, I could see Vivienne gesturing animatedly to a group of well-dressed strangers, pointing out architectural details and leading them through what was supposed to be my home. I pushed through the front door without knocking. The conversation stopped immediately. "Lyra," Vivienne exclaimed, her face flushing slightly. "What a surprise. I wasn't expecting you today." "Clearly," I said, looking around at the potential buyers who were now avoiding eye contact. "What exactly is going on here?" "Oh, just a casual showing," she said with a nervous laugh. "These lovely people were interested in seeing some of the area's historic properties. I thought it would be educational." One of the men cleared his throat. "We were told this property might be available for purchase." My blood ran cold. That evening, I confronted Vivienne in the estate's library. She was sitting behind my father's old desk, surrounded by legal documents and property assessments. "We need to talk," I said, closing the door behind me. She looked up with that same false smile. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" "The people you showed through the house today weren't tourists. They were buyers. And you know this property isn't for sale." Vivienne set down her pen and leaned back in the leather chair. "Actually, that's what I wanted to discuss with you. I've been reviewing the paperwork, and I'm afraid there are some ambiguities in your father's will." "Ambiguities?" "The language is quite unclear about immediate ownership versus long-term inheritance. There are also questions about your capacity to manage such a significant asset at your age." She FFL-ed through the papers importantly. "I've been consulting with attorneys about seeking clarification through the courts." My hands clenched into fists. The will was crystal clear. Dad left me this house. "Oh, darling, it's not that simple. There are tax implications, maintenance costs, insurance considerations. This property requires someone with experience in estate management." Her voice took on a patronizing tone. "I'm just looking out for your best interests." I knew she was lying, but I couldn't figure out her angle yet. The next morning, Vivienne's financial advisor arrived at the estate. Mason Calloway was everything I expected from a predatory consultant: expensive suit, perfect teeth, and a handshake that lingered too long. "Lyra, such a pleasure to meet you," he said, his voice dripping with rehearsed charm. "Vivienne has told me so much about you. I understand you work in technology." "Property technology," I corrected. "I co-founded a startup that specializes in heritage real estate." His smile faltered slightly. "How interesting." "Well, I'm here to help your family navigate this DI cult transition. Estate management can be quite complex, especially for someone without experience in high-value property investments." I watched him spread glossy brochures across the dining table, luxury developments, waterfront condos, commercial real estate opportunities. The current market is incredibly favorable for sellers, he continued. A property like this could easily fetch 15 to 20 million. With proper investment, those proceeds could generate substantial passive income for both of you. Vivienne nodded eagerly. Mason has some wonderful ideas about diversifying the estate's value. I realized then that this wasn't just about stealing my inheritance. They had already planned exactly how to spend it. That night, I called my college friend and business partner Harper Voss. We'd started our property tech company together, and her legal research skills were legendary. I need you to dig into someone, I told her. Vivienne Holt Kane. Find out everything. Finances, debts, legal issues, anything suspicious. Your stepmother? What's going on? I explained the situation, and Harper listened with growing outrage. She's trying to steal your house. That's insane. What does your lawyer say? I haven't called one yet. I want to understand what I'm dealing with first. Smart. Give me 48 hours. 2 days later, Harper arrived at my apartment with a thick folder and a grim expression. Your stepmother is in serious financial trouble, she said, spreading documents across my kitchen table. She owes over $3 million to various creditors. Luxury car loans, designer shopping debts, failed investments in some pyramid scheme wellness company. My stomach dropped. 3 million? It gets worse. She's been living off credit cards and taking cash advances to pay minimum payments. Her credit score is in the toilet, and she's got collection agencies circling. Harper pulled out bank statements. Look at this. She's been selling jewelry and art pieces, probably your father's things. Small amounts, but consistent. She's desperate. Now I understood. The estate wasn't just inheritance to her, it was a $15 million lifeline. The next week, Vivienne's mask finally slipped. I found her in the estate's main parlor, directing 2 men who were carefully removing a priceless antique grandfather clock. What are you doing? I demanded. She didn't even look embarrassed. This old thing was just gathering dust. I found a collector who appreciated its historical value. That clock belonged to my great-grandfather. You have no right to sell it. Actually, I do. Her voice turned cold. As your father's widow, I have certain rights regarding estate property until the ownership questions are legally resolved. There are no ownership questions. Vivienne stepped closer, her perfect composure cracking. Listen carefully, Lyra. This situation can go one of 2 ways. You can cooperate with me, accept a reasonable settlement, and we can both benefit. Or you can fight me, and I'll make your life very difficult. Is that a threat? It's reality. I have connections, resources, and legal standing you don't understand. I can tie this property up in court for years. By the time you see a penny, the legal fees will have eaten everything. She paused, studying my face. Be smart, darling. Take the deal. I watched the men load my family's clock into their truck, and I made a decision. If Vivienne wanted to play dirty, I'd show her what dirty really looked like. Harper worked through the night, and by morning she had found exactly what we needed. Your stepmother forged a document, she announced, waving a paper triumphantly. Look at this, a supposed addendum to your father's will that gives her joint control of the estate. I examined the document carefully. The signature looked like my father's, but something was off about the handwriting. The date is wrong too, Harper continued. This addendum is supposedly from 6 months before your father died, but look at the paper quality and ink type. This was printed recently. How can you tell? The letterhead uses a font that wasn't available until this year. Plus, the signature pressure is all wrong, too light, too careful. Your father always signed with heavy strokes. I felt a surge of excitement. This is forgery. We can have her arrested. Not so fast. We need to be strategic about this. If we reveal this evidence too early, she'll just claim it was a mistake or blame someone else. We need to catch her in the act of using it. Harper was right. Vivienne had underestimated us, but we couldn't underestimate her either. What do you suggest? We let her think she's winning. Meanwhile, we build a bigger case. If she's desperate enough to forge documents, she's probably breaking other laws too. I smiled for the first time in weeks. The game was just getting started. Mason wasted no time spreading poison about me throughout the local real estate community. Within days, I started hearing whispers that I was financially unstable, that my startup was failing, that I was planning to flee the country. Word is she's got major investor troubles. I overheard one broker tell another at a co-FFEE shop. Callaway says she might be bankrupt within months. It was a clever strategy. If potential allies thought I was desperate or unreliable, they'd be more likely to work with Vivienne instead. But Mason didn't know that my startup was actually thriving. We'd just closed a major deal with a heritage foundation, and our client list was growing rapidly. Harper and I had spent years building relationships in the property world, and those relationships were about to pay off. I started making calls to every contact in my network, casually mentioning Mason's name and watching their reactions. "Oh, him," said one investor, her voice dropping. "Be careful there. He's got a reputation for pushing clients into bad deals so he can collect bigger commissions." Another broker was more direct. "Mason Callaway is a snake. He tried to pressure my grandmother into selling her historic home for half its value. We ended up having to threaten legal action." The picture became clear. Mason specialized in manipulating vulnerable people into making profitable mistakes. Vivienne wasn't his partner, she was his mark. Harper's investigation revealed that Vivienne had been systematically looting the estate's contents for months. She'd sold my grandmother's jewelry collection, several valuable paintings, and an entire set of first edition books that had been in our family library. "She's not just desperate," Harper explained, showing me the sales receipts. "She's been planning this since before your father died. Look at these dates. She started selling things just 2 weeks after the wedding." The betrayal cut deep. While my father was alive, Vivienne had been playing the loving wife, but behind his back, she was already treating his possessions like her personal assets. "Where is she selling everything?" "A mix of auction houses and private dealers." I tracked down one of the buyers, an antique dealer in the city. "He still has your grandmother's emerald necklace. Can we get it back?" "Not legally, not yet. But I have his contact information for later." I stared at the sales records, feeling sick. Each item represented a piece of my family's history that Vivienne had casually erased for quick cash. She's probably planning to disappear once she sells the estate, I realized. Take the money and run before anyone notices what she's stolen. Harper nodded grimly. "Which means we need to stop her soon. Before she destroys everything your father left you." Vivienne's next move was a public relations campaign designed to make her look like the responsible adult protecting family assets from an irresponsible young woman. She gave an interview to the local newspaper about the challenges of estate management and the DIFE cult decisions required to preserve family wealth. The article painted her as a devoted stepmother concerned about my emotional state following my father's death. "Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is make the hard choices they're not ready to make themselves," she was quoted saying. Lyra is a bright girl, but she's grieving and not thinking clearly about the practical realities of maintaining such a significant property. The article included a photo of her standing in front of the estate, looking every inch the elegant lady of the manor. She'd even had her hair professionally styled for the shoot. I wanted to throw up. But Harper saw the opportunity. "She's overplaying her hand. Let her dig herself deeper." "What do you mean?" "Every public statement she makes about controlling your property is evidence of her intent to defraud you. The more she talks, the more material we have for our case." Harper was building a comprehensive file of Vivienne's lies and manipulations. Every forged document, every illegal sale, every false public statement was carefully documented and cross-referenced. "When this is over, she won't just lose," Harper promised. "She'll face criminal charges." Harper's legal research uncovered something even more damaging. Vivienne had been illegally renting out parts of the estate for cash income, without permits or tax reporting. "Look at this," Harper said, showing me photographs she'd taken during surveillance. There are 3 separate rental units operating in the estate's guest houses. Short-term vacation rentals, listed on multiple booking platforms. I studied the images. Strangers were staying in my family's property, paying Vivienne directly for accommodations that she had no legal right to provide. This is a serious violation. Operating commercial lodging without proper permits is illegal. She's also not reporting the income, which means tax evasion. Harper had printed out the rental listings, complete with glowing reviews from guests who had enjoyed their historic mansion experience. She's making thousands per month from this scheme, Harper continued. All cash, all unreported. If the authorities found out, she'd face massive fines and potential jail time. I felt a spark of satisfaction. How do we expose this? Carefully. We want to use this information at the right moment for maximum impact. But first, let's see what other laws she's breaking. Harper was already pulling up property tax records and zoning regulations on her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. I have a feeling this is just the beginning, she murmured. Through a contact in the real estate industry, I arranged to meet Conrad Ames, a broker with a reputation for unconventional solutions. We met at a discreet wine bar downtown. Conrad was nothing like Mason, weathered face, practical clothes, and eyes that missed nothing. I hear you're having trouble with Mason Calloway, he said without preamble. You know him? Unfortunately. He cost me a major deal 2 years ago through some very shady maneuvering. I've been waiting for the right opportunity to return the favor. Conrad explained how Mason had sabotaged a historic property sale that Conrad had been working on for months, using forged documents and false claims about the property's legal status. He targets vulnerable sellers, widows, elderly people, anyone who doesn't understand the market. Then he manipulates them into accepting lowball OFFers so he can flip the properties for massive profits. That sounds like what he's doing to my stepmother. Probably worse. If she's already in debt, he's got her exactly where he wants her. He'll push her to sell fast and cheap, take his commission, and leave her with just enough money to pay OFF her most urgent debts. Conrad leaned forward. But here's what he doesn't know. I specialize in outmaneuvering people like him. If you're willing to get creative, I can help you turn this situation around. What kind of creative? Conrad smiled, and for the first time in weeks, I felt hope. Harper's investigation into Vivienne's mortgage revealed the perfect weapon, a violation clause that could trigger an immediate forced sale of her house. Look at this, Harper said, highlighting a section of the mortgage documents. If the property is used as collateral for any additional loans without bank approval, they can demand immediate full payment. I read the clause carefully. Has she violated this? Absolutely. I found records of a private loan she took 6 months ago, using the house as collateral. She borrowed $500,000 from some sketchy private lending company to cover her most urgent debts. Harper pulled out more documents. The loan terms are predatory, 30% interest, balloon payment due in 18 months. She's already missed 2 payments. Does the bank know about this? Not yet. But they will if someone files the proper notification. I stared at the paperwork, understanding the implications. If the bank learned about Vivienne's violation, they could force her to pay OFF the entire mortgage immediately. Given her financial situation, she'd have no choice but to sell her house. This is it, I realized. This is how we stop her. Harper nodded. But we have to time it perfectly. If we trigger this too early, she might find a way to wiggle out of it. We need to wait until she's committed to selling your estate, then hit her when she can't back out. The trap was set. Now we just had to wait for the right moment to spring it. Through careful investigation, Harper discovered that Vivienne had already breached the loan agreement terms multiple times, and Mason didn't know about any of it. She's been hiding the private loan from him, Harper explained. Look at these financial statements she provided to Mason versus the real bank records. She's lying about her debt levels. The documents told a clear story. Vivienne owed far more money than she'd admitted, and her financial situation was much worse than even Mason realized. If he knew the truth, he'd probably walk away from this deal, Harper continued. The commission isn't worth the legal risks if everything falls apart. But Mason's ignorance was working in our favor. He was pushing Vivienne toward a quick sale based on incomplete information, which meant he was building his strategy on a foundation of lies. "There's more," Harper said, pulling out another file. "The private lending company she borrowed from has connections to some very unsavory people. If she defaults on that loan, she's going to have bigger problems than losing her house." I felt a chill. What kind of people? The kind who don't accept "I can't pay" as an answer. She's in way over her head, and she probably doesn't even realize it yet. Vivienne's desperation was starting to make sense. She wasn't just trying to steal my inheritance for greed, she was trying to save her own life. Conrad and I began setting up the infrastructure for our counterstrike. Using his network of contacts, we identified a potential buyer for Vivienne's house, a developer who specialized in acquiring distressed properties quickly. He's legitimate, Conrad assured me, but he moves fast and doesn't ask unnecessary questions. If Vivienne's house hits the market, he'll be ready to make an immediate cash offer. We established a shadow purchasing entity, carefully structured to hide my involvement while giving me ultimate control over the transaction. The beauty of this setup, Conrad explained, is that everything happens through intermediaries. By the time Vivienne realizes what's happening, it'll be too late to stop. Meanwhile, Harper was preparing the legal documentation we'd need to trigger the bank's enforcement of the mortgage violation clause. "I've got everything ready," she reported. "One phone call to the bank's fraud department, and they'll start immediate foreclosure proceedings." But we weren't ready to move yet. We needed Vivienne to commit herself completely to the estate sale first, so she couldn't retreat when her own house was threatened. "Patience," Conrad advised. In real estate, timing is everything. Move too early, and you give your opponent room to escape. Move too late, and you miss your window entirely. I was learning that revenge, like property development, required careful planning and perfect execution. It was time to feed Mason false information that would push both him and Vivienne into making desperate moves. I arranged for rumors to reach Mason through his network, carefully crafted lies about my supposed plan to leave the country permanently, abandoning any claim to the estate. Word is she's taking a job in London. I overheard one of Conrad's contacts tell Mason at a real estate mixer. Something about wanting to get away from all the family drama. The bait worked perfectly. Within days, Mason was pushing Vivienne to accelerate the sale timeline. "We need to move quickly," I heard him tell her during a phone call I accidentally intercepted. "If she disappears overseas, the legal situation becomes much more complicated." Harper monitored their communications, tracking how the false information was influencing their strategy. "They're panicking," she reported. "Mason is telling her they need to finalize everything within 2 weeks, before you can flee the jurisdiction." The irony was beautiful. Mason thought he was rushing to secure his payday before I escaped, but he was actually rushing toward his own downfall. "They're making all the mistakes we hoped they would," Harper continued. "Cutting corners, skipping due diligence, ignoring proper procedures. Every shortcut they take gives us more ammunition." I smiled. Sometimes the best strategy was simply letting your enemies defeat themselves. Under pressure from Mason's artificial deadline, Vivienne began frantically trying to finalize the estate sale. She scheduled multiple property showings, pushed for quick buyer decisions, and started pressuring potential purchasers to make immediate offers. "She's acting desperate," Conrad observed after attending one of her open houses. "That's never good in real estate. Buyers can smell desperation, and it makes them suspicious." But Mason had convinced Vivienne that speed was more important than strategy. She was airing the property at below market value to encourage quick sales, exactly the kind of mistake that would benefit our hidden agenda. "She's sabotaging her own negotiating position," Harper noted. "If she'd taken her time and marketed properly, she could have gotten full value. Instead, she's basically announcing that she needs to sell immediately." The rushed timeline was also causing procedural errors. Vivienne was cutting corners on inspections, rushing through legal documentation, and failing to complete proper buyer verification processes. "Every mistake she makes creates opportunities for us," Conrad explained. Sloppy paperwork can be challenged. Incomplete disclosures can void contracts. She's building her own trap. Meanwhile, we were positioning ourselves to take advantage of every error, preparing to turn Vivienne's haste into our strategic advantage. Harper and Conrad worked together to establish an anonymous trust that could purchase the Kane estate without revealing my involvement. The legal structure was complex but bulletproof. The trust is registered in Delaware, with multiple layers of corporate ownership, Harper explained. Even if someone investigates thoroughly, they won't be able to trace it back to you. The trust had Historic waterfront properties are always attractive to preservation trusts and heritage foundations. We established a credible backstory for the trust, a conservation organization focused on protecting historically significant coastal properties. The narrative was believable and would explain why they were willing to move quickly on the purchase. When the time comes, this trust will make an offer Vivienne can't refuse, Harper said. Full asking price, cash payment, no contingencies. She'll think she's won the lottery. But the trust's purchase agreement would include specific terms that would protect the property's heritage status and limit future development options, terms that would effectively ensure the estate remained exactly as my father intended. Our surveillance of the estate revealed even more evidence of Vivienne's illegal activities. Harper had documented extensive proof of the unpermitted rental operations, including photographs, guest receipts, and booking confirmations. She's not just running illegal rentals, Harper discovered. She's also hosting private events, weddings, corporate retreats, even some kind of wellness retreats. All without proper licensing or permits. The evidence was overwhelming. Vivienne had turned the estate into a commercial venue without any legal authorization, violating zoning laws, fire safety regulations, and tax requirements. If the authorities found out about this, she'd face massive fines and potential criminal charges, Harper continued. The city takes illegal commercial operations very seriously, especially in historic districts. I studied the photographs of strangers celebrating their wedding in my family's gardens, using our historic mansion as a backdrop for events my father never would have approved of. She's not just stealing the property, I realized. She's desecrating it. Harper nodded grimly. But that's good for us. The more laws she breaks, the stronger our case becomes. When this is over, she won't just lose, she'll face serious consequences for everything she's done. The evidence file was growing thicker every day, creating an unassailable case against Vivienne's theft and fraud. Conrad quietly contacted the bank that held Vivienne's mortgage, providing them with carefully documented evidence of her loan violation. The notification was professional and thorough, leaving no room for misunderstanding. I've submitted all the relevant documentation, Conrad reported. The bank's legal department is reviewing the case, and they should start enforcement proceedings within a few days. The process was designed to be swift and merciless. Once the bank confirmed the violation, they would demand immediate payment of the full mortgage balance. Given Vivienne's financial situation, she would have no choice but to put her house on the market immediately. The timing is perfect, Harper added. She'll receive the foreclosure notice right around the same time she's expecting to finalize the estate sale. She'll think she can use those proceeds to solve her mortgage problem. But our anonymous trust's purchase of the estate would include specific terms that would delay the actual transfer of funds, creating a gap between her expectations and reality. She's going to find herself trapped, Conrad explained. Committed to losing your estate, forced to sell her own house, and unable to access the money she's counting on to solve her problems. The countdown had begun. In a matter of days, Vivienne's entire scheme would collapse around her. Mason's overconfidence led to a crucial mistake when he bragged about his money laundering operation to someone he thought was a potential partner, but who was actually one of Conrad's carefully placed contacts. He's not just flipping properties, Conrad reported after his contact debriefed us. He's using estate sales to clean money for some very questionable clients. Your stepmother's sale is just one piece of a much larger criminal operation. The information was explosive. Mason wasn't just a predatory real estate advisor, he was actively involved in financial crimes that would interest federal investigators. He told my contact that he specializes in finding desperate sellers who won't ask questions about where their buyer's money comes from, Conrad continued. He's been using estate sales to legitimize dirty money for years. Harper immediately began documenting everything. This changes the entire game. If Mason is involved in money laundering, every transaction he's involved in becomes evidence of criminal activity. The implications were staggering. Vivienne thought she was just selling my inheritance to solve her debt problems, but she was actually participating in a federal crime. When the authorities investigate this, Harper said, they'll uncover everything. The forged documents, the illegal rentals, the hidden debts, all of it. She won't just lose the house. She'll probably go to prison. Mason's arrogance had finally caught up with him, and he was about to drag Vivienne down with him. The morning of the estate sale closing, Vivienne arrived at the lawyer's office radiating confidence. She wore her most expensive suit and carried herself like someone who had just solved all her problems. I watched from my car across the street as she and Mason walked into the building, both of them smiling and chatting casually. They had no idea that the anonymous trust waiting inside was about to shatter their entire world. She looks happy, Harper observed from the passenger seat. She thinks she's about to become a millionaire, I replied. Instead, she's about to become homeless. Conrad was already inside, representing the mysterious trust that would be purchasing the estate. The trust's lawyers had reviewed every document, prepared every contingency, and structured the deal to maximize Vivienne's shock when the truth was revealed. My phone buzzed with a text from Conrad, they're signing the preliminary paperwork now. Vivienne just asked about the timeline for fund transfer. I smiled. In about 10 minutes, Vivienne would learn that the buyer was a conservation trust that intended to preserve the estate exactly as it was, and that the funds would be held in escrow pending a thorough investigation of the property's legal status. She thought she was selling my inheritance. Instead, she was about to lose everything while the estate returned to exactly where it belonged. The first shock hit when the buyer's attorney revealed the trust's true conditions. The purchase was legitimate, but the funds would be held in escrow pending resolution of any legal challenges to the sale. What do you mean, legal challenges? Vivienne demanded, her confident demeanor cracking slightly. The trust has been made aware of certain irregularities in the property's ownership documentation, the attorney explained carefully. Until these issues are resolved, the purchase funds will remain in a protected account. Mason leaned forward aggressively. What irregularities? We've provided all the necessary documentation. Including several documents that appear to contain forged signatures, the attorney replied calmly, placing Harper's evidence file on the table. I watched through the office window as Vivienne's face went pale. She was beginning to realize that someone had been investigating her activities much more thoroughly than she'd imagined. Additionally, the attorney continued, the trust requires a full investigation of any illegal commercial activities conducted on the property, including unpermitted rentals and event hosting. Vivienne and Mason exchanged panicked glances. Their perfect plan was disintegrating in real time, and they were helpless to stop it. The attorney opened another folder. There's also the matter of the property's true ownership, which appears to belong entirely to Ms. Lyra Kane according to the legitimate will. Before Vivienne could fully process the first shock, a courier arrived with an envelope marked urgent foreclosure notice. She opened it with shaking hands, her face growing whiter as she read the bank's demand for immediate payment of her full mortgage balance. This is impossible, she whispered. There must be some mistake. No mistake, the bank's representative said, having appeared as if on cue. You violated your mortgage terms by using the property as collateral for an unauthorized loan. The bank is exercising its right to demand immediate payment. Mason was frantically scanning the foreclosure documents, looking for some way to challenge them. But Harper's documentation was flawless, and the bank's legal position was unassailable. You have 30 days to pay the full balance of $2.3 million, the bank representative continued, or the property will be sold at public auction. Vivienne turned to Mason desperately. The estate sale money, we can use that to pay off the mortgage. What estate sale money? The trust's attorney interjected. The funds are in escrow pending investigation of fraud charges. They won't be available for months, if ever. I watched Vivienne's face as the full scope of her trap became clear. She had gambled everything on stealing my inheritance, and instead she had lost her own home while gaining nothing in return. Mason was already gathering his papers, preparing to abandon his client now that the deal had collapsed. I sat in the cafe across the street, sipping coffee and watching as the moving trucks arrived at Vivienne's house. Through the window, I could see her standing on the sidewalk, surrounded by cardboard boxes and the remnants of her former life. The auction had happened quickly. Conrad's developer friend had purchased the house for cash, just as we'd planned. Vivienne had received just enough money to pay off her most urgent debts, but nowhere near enough to maintain her lifestyle or find comparable housing. She looked older somehow, her perfect composure finally cracked beyond repair. Mason had disappeared as soon as the criminal investigation began, leaving her to face the consequences alone. My phone buzzed with a text message. I typed a simple response: "You taught me how fast a home can slip away." Harper joined me at the cafe, carrying a folder of final paperwork. "The estate transfer is complete," she announced. "The Conservation Trust has officially conveyed the property back to you, with all the protections you requested." I watched as strangers loaded Vivienne's designer furniture into trucks, reducing her life to inventory items. She had tried to steal my father's legacy, and in the process, she had lost everything she thought was secure. "Justice," Harper said softly, following my gaze. I nodded, finishing my coffee. Some lessons could only be learned the hard way, and Vivienne had just received the most expensive education of her life. The Kane family estate was finally safe, and I was going home.